Alrighty, so welcome again, everybody. Just to let you know, we typically go for about an hour with these kinds of events. I have a couple of pre-listed questions that we usually ask everybody. Tonight, there's going to be a sort of focus on Phil in particular because of his library science background, but we're also really happy to have Richie and Courtney with us talk about the Music and Gaming Festival and also their own professional experiences and advice that they have to offer. So let us get started. Oh, and just in case, if you haven't been to one of these before, there will be time at the end to ask your own questions. But honestly, feel free to just pop them in the chat as they come up and then we'll get to them. So let me bring up my list. So actually, why don't we go around? Is everybody comfortable just sort of talking a little bit about themselves, how you got involved with MAGFest, and then sort of what you're doing professionally with your career right now? Actually, Phil, do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, wasn't sure what to do. Yeah, hi there, I'm Phil Salvador. I am the library director of the Video Game History Foundation, a position I've had for 2 months now, so that's a new thing that's happening. I was an attendee for at MAGFest for many years, started volunteering, eventually got involved on the panel side of things, helping organize educational, in particular, game history and game preservation content for the event. I'm very happy to have, we found some folks who are able to take the responsibility on now, so I'm now in more of a consulting role, I guess. I don't really know what you would call it, but primarily working with the foundation now.
Cool, awesome. Richie or Courtney, whoever wants to jump in next, if you guys want to talk about it yourself.
Or you can go ahead first.
All right, that sounds fine. So my name is Courtney Smith, and I have been going to MAGFest for a long time, and the same had started volunteering, quite a few years ago in various different areas. And so I've done many different hats, but probably my main role in MAGFest is less on organizing and has been more so on how I take MAGFest and have started relating that into research and how I use that in communication studies at Purdue University, which is where I'm currently at and about to enter my final year for my PhD, and then planning to take it from there.
Hi, I'm Richie. I've been going to MAGFest, well, regularly since I guess 2018, but I accidentally crashed MAGFest back in 2006 when I was on tour with my band, and I was in a McDonald's, and all these like kind of nerdy / cosplayer people just like swarmed the McDonald's, and I was like, what is this? And then it was MAGFest, and I sort of went, and it was pretty amazing. Like, it was completely different than what it is now, but still amazing. And then officially started going, a few years back. And then I think the first year that I went as an official, not gate crasher, it was like at 2:30 in the morning, there was a panel about audio equipment. And I was like, and as a an engineer and a producer, I was like, what the fuck? Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, you're Kurt. Yeah, that's fine. I don't care.
Okay. I'll try not to. Though. But I was like, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I knew it was like music and gaming, and I'm a big gamer. I have been since I was a kid, and I then hit up Mages and was like, I do this stuff for a living. If you need, an extra panelist to, because I know people who go there like make music, especially either they're making it for games or for, as a hobby, or as they're trying to break into it. And as an educator myself, and a curriculum designer and like audio engineering, I was like, oh, this should be a breeze. And it was awesome to be like a part of that group. And I've been doing panels there. Did a panel in 2020, and then panel again this year, and gonna probably do another one for MAGWest this summer. What do I for a living? I'm an audio engineer and a producer. That's what I do for a living. Hello, everybody.
Sick. Awesome. Cool. So can already think of a couple extra questions I want to ask you guys, but I'm going to start with Phil. So Phil, do you want to talk about where you got your master's in library science from, and just any particular, I guess, experiences like from grad school you want to talk about, or anything that really stands out in your memory?
Yeah, so it's weird. I kind of fell into librarianship. Like I have a master's in library science, but it was really I had been working at a library in undergrad and realized like, okay, this is more interesting to me than my major. I like the organizational aspect of this. I like the delivery of information. And then, parlay that into pivoting at the last minute, going to grad school for library science. I went to Catholic University of America in DC because we had a tuition exchange program with them, and it was just the most affordable option in the DC area. What I will say is, thinking about experiences in grad school in library science, I think one of the things that was difficult, I guess, is I feel like I don't know if this is something that other folks in library school now see, but I feel like there's always a focus on people who are doing things involving like, books and print media, because I think that's what a lot of people are drawn to. A lot of people have, nostalgic memories of libraries and all of that. And that's what drives a lot of people into library science. I worked in media librarianship. So I was doing like our film collection at the university I worked at. And it was kind of difficult to see myself in there, if that makes any sense. That it was something that the areas of interest I was focusing on, that wasn't as strongly represented. What really kind of drove it home for me was, I have, of course, have always been interested in games. I have been running a blog for many years about like weird old computer games that no one can run anymore. It was all, that was always like a big difficulty, was like, how do I get this, Macintosh game from 1996 to run on my computer? I had gone up to New York for an event. There was a museum that was doing an exhibit where they were curating some of those. They'd gotten a collection of old girls games from like 1996, 97. And they had a setup where they were able to run the games in a web browser, which I thought was really exciting. It's like, okay, this is much easier. A lot of people can use this. This is like, it's better than having to, set this up at home for 10 hours. When I came back the next week, that in library school that week, our lesson was about digital curation, and they talked about emulation as a thing libraries use. And that was the moment where it was like, okay, it's like, this is the thing that I'm interested in. And now we are talking about it a little bit in library school. Even though it's not the focus, there's something here. Like, these areas don't have to be separate spheres of my life. Like, there are ways I can bring my own personal interests into librarianship and into this library science program. That was kind of the turning point in my mind for me in terms of like really committing to librarianship in the specific way that I am right now. I know it was a great moment realizing, just through the variety of courses being offered, where it's like, okay, there are places to see yourself and your own career interests reflected in this stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really sick. I think it's cool that you were talking about like girls' games from the late 90s, because that it really like, oh, that takes me back.
Which ones? What's the one?
There's a specific one that like my sister and I have inside jokes about a lot, and it's Barbie. It's Detective Barbie, I think, and it. Oh my God, I don't know if that was one of the ones there, but it was.
Is that the one where they go to the carnival? I know.
Yes.
Okay.
It's an extremely. I look back and I think, I don't know why I was allowed to play this when I was 5 years old. There's some pretty wild stuff going on in that game. You have to break Ken out of a box with a crowbar, and like, you could never really finish it because there was a glitch. Anyway, that was a funny reminder. To tell my sister about that later. But sick. I think a lot of us can really relate to like having that moment in library school where you kind of, whether it be early on or later on, where something just kind of clicks and you really like find like, oh, hey, I can go down this path. So that's really cool. So, whoops, where's my question list? Oh, okay. So actually, for each of you guys, again, sort of under the like umbrella of professional advice, and if you don't really have like a direct answer for this, anything is acceptable, honestly. But do you want to talk about like maybe what a particular day in the life looks like for you at work? I'm sure it like differs a lot for like each of you guys, but if you don't have a typical day in the life, what would like your ideal day look like too?
Someone wants to go first. I was just talking a lot, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I'll go first, probably since I think a lot of this is intended like graduate student. And so probably a really similar lifestyle at the moment, since that is currently where I'm at. I, at my university, do teach, but not specifically about video game music, other communication topics. Research focuses more so on video games in a lot of different ways, but my dissertation is on video game music. So a day in the life is I teach, and then once I'm finished teaching, I go to my office, and then I try to focus very specifically on like reading a lot about video games. And I think that that really ties in well to this like conversation about like you can find this topic of interest and how it applies in your field in a lot of different places. And so, you know, my area of study is communication. When I go to MAGFest and talking about music and video games, there are a lot of people there who come from different areas, and it really spreads the way that you talk about video game music and how that just influences like your access to things. So Video Game Music History Foundation, I have read lots of stuff that contributes all the time to the way I am thinking about things, how I'm researching. So when we're talking about day in a life, I think reading is very much essential, and like using lots of resources and tools that are going to feed into questions and like the information and knowledge that we have, because video game music research is still fairly new, young, and there's a lot to explore in it. So I don't know if that's so much a day in a life is like a process in a life, but that's kind of where I'm at currently, and in that process of studying, researching, writing, and implementing things.
Awesome.
I guess I'll go next. So my typical day on any given day usually revolves around my clients. So I have clients all over the world. So I'm usually getting up whenever I have to make the first phone call. For example, there's an artist that I'm working with in Japan currently who's an Anna-song singer. She also is a voice actress on like Pokemon and the Pokemon games, and she sang in Naruto. She has a closing theme. She's from DC, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
Her name is Diana Garnett, and she won a contest and moved to Japan and became a J-pop singer. Living the dream. But she's also 14 hours ahead, so I have to wake up at 4 a.m. sometimes to get on a phone call with her. Sometimes if my clients are in LA, I have to wake up, so I'm in New York. I'm actually moving over to the West Coast at the end of next month. So hopefully I won't have to wake up that early anymore. I don't know. I have yet to see how I'm going to adjust to the time difference. But once I'm done talking to clients and figuring what what I have to do for them or on a project basis, then I start my job, which is either composing music or mixing music. If I'm working for an artist where I'm writing and helping produce, then writing and recording. If I'm mixing for them, the music I have is already recorded, and it's my job to sort of put it together in a cohesive way where it's competitive in their genre and in the listening space, and almost taking, I'm basically the ears that take into consideration all the not creative things that artists shouldn't be thinking about, like what does the audience want, or I'm thinking about semiotics of the genre, and that was actually one of the panels that I gave the first time, was genre semiotics and how to craft a song around what they may think the audience will expect, and that's what I do, and that can go on for hours, or it could hopefully, like today, I just took a break from a mix. I'll probably be mixing for the next maybe 3 hours, and then after I'm done, I play Elden Ring until 4 a.m. That's what I'm doing.
Nice.
I'll take a break for an hour or two a day to go to the gym, because I sit around all day, and physical activity is super important when you have to sit around all day. Otherwise, your brain kind of turns to mush. Let's see what else. that's it. I mean, it's sort of like I work I work a lot. I deal a lot with projects. There's also like admin that I have to do for myself, where build the bookkeeping, and I'm constantly looking for ways to sort of streamline the boring but necessary stuff, like invoicing clients, and uh, also a lot of reading on random science stuff. So I don't know if you could see, I'm in a studio, which is a room that's built out of my apartment because I don't like to. Real estate's expensive in New York, so I try to work from my house, and I converted a bedroom into a mixing room, and I have to take into account acoustics. And I didn't major in physics in college, so I would in math also. So there's a lot, I'm constantly researching ways to sort of hack a residential space to make it work as a commercial audio facility. Usually, because if you're building an audio facility, they're big buildings and you have a lot of space. But when you're confined to an apartment, how do you get the sound to sort of mold to your will? And it takes a lot of trigonometry and a lot of physics. And it's all interesting stuff. Thankfully, I'm a nerd, so I don't. It's not like I hate learning. I really like to learn things, and it's really interesting. But if I knew I was going to do this for a living, I probably would have taken a physics course, or at least taken an advanced physics course, because a lot of this stuff plays a role. And also in electronics, it's all math and physics. So just like you, Courtney, I'm constantly reading. Although I would like to be reading more about video game music. I'm reading about gas resistivity in fiberglass insulation, but still, it's still interesting to me.
That's awesome. I applaud you for being able to sort of appreciate the learning in physics and all of that, because I joke with one of the attendees here who I work with, I didn't become a librarian to be doing math. And so wherever we're doing math in course
Right.
things, I'm always like, oh, but yeah, that's really cool. And it's part of learning. So
yeah. For my day in the life, I actually kind of want to build off what Richie was saying about just like having to learn other things. I'll get back to it in a second, but to give kind of an intro for this, so the Video Game History Foundation, where I do my professional librarian work, it's a fairly new organization. The library is like an office space in California. I'm in Maryland right now, which obviously makes it more complicated. But we like to think of ourselves as being like a library startup. And what that means is, I think basically every other library job, you are coming into existing systems. You're coming into years of administration choices and systems and all that. We are kind of building it up from scratch, which is weird. It's a very strange experience, but it means that, I have primary tasks where it's like, we need to get what we have in the collection cataloged, but it's also just kind of like what is getting thrown at us today. Like what, we're having to set up our digital infrastructure. And so sometimes it's like vendor negotiations. We're trying to figure out like the legal rationale for some of the things we want to do. So a lot of the times it's, talking with advocacy groups. It's, I think a really good example is for the longest time in my library work, to get like real library science nitty gritty for a second, I was on the library side of things, and we were using, an ILS, like we were using Alma, we were cataloging in Mark 21 RDA. I'm jumping into this, and we are using a different system. I've had to learn a totally different cataloging standard. It's been a ride. It's been an experience, but I think what has really helped has been that I don't want to say like I'm trained as a generalist and therefore this is good, but like I think it has been helpful that I know a bunch of stuff well. To get back to Richie's point, that like I do have like my specialization. Like I could go back and continue doing like film librarianship stuff. Like I know how to do that, but I've also built up skills just from other things, like from the experience I've had doing all this weird game stuff. That has helped. Just interacting with other systems, things that are adjacent to library science, has helped keep me, flexible for these kind of challenges. A really fun example is that during lockdown, my friends and I got really bored, and we made a Doom mod, like the old video game Doom. We made a mod for Doom, and I basically had to teach myself how to code C. And it was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And then every day it's like, oh, I can apply the skills I learned making this Doom mod to my professional life. And I don't like it, but it helps. Like it helps to just interact with different spheres beyond just the specific skills you are trying to learn. Just having the flexibility to like take on another responsibility or to go into something that is slightly outside your comfort range or what you're exactly trained on helps so much. I think especially in my own world, just because it's so I think I described it to someone as frontier librarianship, which is probably not a good term for that, but like it's so on the edge of like what's being done. But in general, like I think it's super useful to be able to push yourself beyond your comfort zone on tasks that may come up, just having a wide range of experiences.
I really like how you put that. And like, I think frontier library or librarianship is like, I think that's a really good term. And it was like, it makes me think there's so many things in libraries and librarianship that are considered old because the concept of that has been around like forever. But this is really important, and embracing new things and new systems is like something that I remember has been talked about so much in library school. And like, we have to do this in order to like stick with the times and adapt to new technologies and that kind of thing. So
I just want to say on that, as someone who was applying for library jobs about a year ago, I was intimidated by a lot of postings where it's like, you need to know these 12 cataloging standards. And it's like, oh, I'm trained on one of these things.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't help. But it was the kind of thing where it's like, okay, I guess I could sort of say I can do those because it's like, you're not learning everything from scratch. Like if you know the principles of librarianship, you know why you're doing the cataloging, why you're organizing things the way you are. It's like, that's more important than any particular skill. Like being able to throw yourself at something, I think is more valuable than having, aside from like, getting specific certifications and stuff, that matters too. But like, apart from that, like it is helpful to have a broad, I'm kind of repeating myself, but you get the idea.
No, it's okay. No, I totally get what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, having also tried to like read those job descriptions and everything, they can be super intimidating, but also like being like a low level, like professional staff member at Drexel too. It's also definitely just a wish list for a lot of people because there's so many cataloging systems that like aren't just heavily used. So like, yeah. Something else I wanted to ask you, so you kind of touched on this at the beginning of your last response, but could you tell us more about the Video Game History Foundation, about how old is it, and is there anything new and exciting you guys are doing?
We're this many years. We are 5 years old. We are a fairly new organization. So the goal of the Video Game History Foundation, the way we like to put it is that we are trying to make game history better. And that can mean a lot of things. A big part of it is doing advocacy around the industry. And that can be things like giving talks about this, about video game preservation, video game history issues, advocating within the industry. We're getting involved with, there's an annual process where libraries can apply to, make exemptions to certain parts of copyright law. And like, we're getting involved in that now to help make the case for more exemptions for video game preservation. But another big part of it, and this is where I'm involved, this is where a lot of my responsibility is in the actual collection of things, that we've realized that a lot of things in the game industry just get tossed out. There's kind of this twin culture of disposability and secrecy, where it's like, none of this matters, so we can throw it away. And the stuff we didn't throw away, no one can ever see it again because it's secret, is kind of how the video game industry treats everything. So in addition to like trying to change attitudes on that, we're also trying to collect it. We want resources that will make it easier for people to tell the story of video games. If it's like a YouTuber, like we want to be able to give them resources. If it's someone like writing their PhD dissertation, like no matter who it is, like we want to be able to give them things they can use to study video games. And right now, a big focus is, for us right now, is magazines and print material, just because it's sort of a finite thing we can collect. There's only so many video game magazines in the world, and I think we're up to like 90% like of US magazines. Like we've gotten pretty far, and it feels good. There's like one journal of game music that we have like issue 3 or something, and it's like, where are we going to find those? So that's always frustrating. But a big part of what I'm doing right now, just as we are still setting things up, is just getting an inventory of what we have, because previously our collection was like in a bunch of boxes in storage units, and now it's on shelves. I have an inventory I'm cataloging from. So like it is, I think the way I'm approaching it is that for me right now, this librarianship is the process of taking a bunch of stuff in boxes and things that our founder knows and translating that into an actual resource people can use. At least in my position, that's what a lot of what I'm doing right now is, in addition to the, the copyright advocacy stuff. But in terms of like, the things I learned in library school type of librarianship, that is what I'm doing right now, just codifying what we have. We have a lot of initiatives we're doing. We are working with video game industry closely to figure out like how to handle things like source code. Like obviously they don't want that leaking out, but we need to make it available to researchers. So we have something called the Video Game Source Initiative, where we're working with a bunch of folks in and adjacent to the video game industry to, again, both collect things and figure out how we can make it accessible. I'm trying to figure out, because you said like if you have any new exciting things happening, but I think a lot of it is just beginning to ramp a lot of those things up. It was very exciting. We recently kicked off our the source initiative. We have sort of an internal committee where it's the folks who are around the industry. We can talk about this stuff, and we finally kicked that off. And it was like, this is so cool. I am like the librarian on the panel of folks from game company and university. Like it was so cool. It was really exciting. So I think a lot of the really cool stuff we're doing doesn't translate super well to like things you can advertise to people, just because it is that kind of like breaking ground and setting foundations for things to build on. But we do occasionally get really cool individual things that we can, show off to people. The example from, I think, last year or 2 years ago was they found an unreleased, if anyone remembers NBA Jam, it was the baseball version of NBA Jam that never came out.
Wow.
And we have that, and they got engineers and they like recompiled it from the source code and got it running on an arcade cabinet. And it's okay. The game has some issues. I get why it was canceled, but like, it's really exciting. It's fun too, because the foundation, I'm rambling, but the foundation had been a lot of people who were around the industry. Again, like it had been software engineers. It was people who had done development. I think it's really exciting that they've invested in a librarian, not just for my own sake, but because it's like, okay, now we can, in addition to just like, here's a cool thing, we got it running, it's all hooked up with wires and they're all sparking. It's now like, all right, how can we catalog that and put it into a preservation friendly format for the long term? That's really exciting to me. To anyone else, that probably sounds boring, but like to library science folks, it's like, oh, that's so cool. Like we're actually making like a real thing and not just like stuff in a folder. So that's really exciting to me.
All of the things you said, 100%. Like obviously I'm biased, but I think that that's insane. And people are going to be glad that you did that years or even whenever down the line when they're looking for something really obscure and you cataloged it and it's findable. And that's what I always say when anybody has, thing to say.
My recent example was, we found
go ahead.
It was an old magazine. It was like a game code magazine that for some reason that issue came with an Adam Sandler sticker. We don't know why. It was like a promotional thing. But our issue is like still in like the plastic bag when you get it off the newsstand. So it still has the sticker. So like when I started cataloging, I came to like the contents field. I was like, one magazine, one Adam Sandler sticker. And that's going to be useful to some weird person in 20 years. And it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
I would imagine that would be useful to somebody now, just who's interested in like any kind of thing that has to do with Adam Sandler. But that's just like, I don't know. That's so wild.
The banality of like late 90s gaming culture.
Yeah. This is fascinating to me. And I'm sure I'm like preaching to the choir here, but it's cool because all of us are here because we have like these common interests, and it feels like video gaming is something that, it's one of those things that despite its popularity, it hasn't been around for super, super long in the grand scheme of things. And so kind of watching actively and listening to you guys talk about how this is getting saved and this is getting researched and built upon and spread to other people. Like, this is fascinating. This is literally, we're watching this happen in real time. And I think that's awesome. So I'm a little ahead of the game here, but thank you, Patrick, for helping us organize this, because this is awesome. Courtney, I wanted to ask you, so with what you teach and then also with what you're researching for your PhD, did MAGFest help you sort of get to that point, or was this something that you kind of knew you wanted to do before? I guess how did it like help you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, actually, that relates really closely to how you're talking about like these things are becoming and like growing and going from the ground, because I took years off between my master's degree and my PhD. And so when I was doing my master's, I knew that I wanted to study video games, and there was research on video games, but it was very young at that time. And so in the time that I took off between then and now, a lot of things have changed. A lot of people are researching it. And so I think knowing I wanted to study video games was always fairly true. MAGFest more so came to me when my brother had invited me to attend with him one year. And gosh, I don't even remember what year it was. I want to say whatever year, like Castlevania, maybe it's the year before that. It was a while back.
Castlevania is 2017. I don't know why I know this story.
Oh no, I think it was before then even. So yeah, who knows which one was my first one anymore. So yeah, I've been going for a while, and I don't think I had realized while I was attending, like, oh, I want to research this, because I wasn't in my PhD yet. But I had started attending panel talks, and I was listening to people talk about their research about it. And I knew I wanted to be an instructor. I had already done instruction as a master's student. And so part of the reason to get my PhD was to teach. And so when I went to go get my PhD and was teaching, and I knew I wanted to study video games, and then I was starting to think about research questions, I guess I had never thought about MAGFest as my connection. But obviously the questions that I wanted to explore, the things I wanted to read, the people I was talking to, related very strongly around that circle, and those were what I was listening to, and that really inspires what I then started to look at and research. And so it plays a big role, whether I realized it at the time or not, into how I got to where I am currently. And so what I teach, I mean, I've done public speaking, which is fairly common across the board for people who do communication, but I also do media technology society. I talk and research about live streaming and parasocial relationships, Twitch, that kind of stuff. And I also do instruction about communication, information, and just technology and the relationship between those things, and how it changes the way we talk to each other, and how the systems that you interact with really change, like what you see, what you interact with, like the way that the world is kind of changing in how we talk with one another. And so all of it kind of plays together to me in terms of video games. I've always been someone who has been very interested in newer technologies, because I think a lot of people who game are, because that's how you get into spaces with people who are gaming. A lot of it is very digital. It's very technology based. So it's all very interconnected and related, but it's interesting because the music side for me, I think part of the reason I had not considered researching it originally is a lot of video game music research that I read early on, I do not understand, because the deep dark secret is I don't know how to read music. So it seems counterintuitive to think about the idea of studying music when you don't know how to read music, which is something I have been improving upon as a concept. But whether you know how to read music or not, you still hear, and it's communicating with you, and it's an experience, and it has impact on you and your experience with the video game. And so that's where my area specifically is really focused on, is kind of that. What do I hear as a player? How do I feel about it? How does that change how I interact with the video game, and everything in that area?
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, that's so cool to think about, like, all of those things together in the relationship as well. I will also admit, as somebody who both played and sang music growing up, I still can't read music either. So yeah, it's hard to admit sometimes that I kept that secret for years. But yeah, music is hard to
It's
read.
okay. We do it together, and it's a shared thing, and it's fine.
You can just pretend. It's one of those rare things that you can pretend like you know, and usually get by with, you know, with other helpful things. So all right, I'm looking at the time here. So I want to have time for others to ask questions, but I have a few left for all of you. So and that you guys don't have to answer this in any particular order, but something that we've been kind of asking a lot of people at the last few coffee chats. If you want, you also do not have to comment on this, because the last 2 years have been extremely rough, but is there any way that the pandemic and all of the changes that have happened in the last year affected you professionally and or your work. You feel like it affected that in either a really positive way or a really negative way, or just any sort of way that, I don't know, I guess sort of change the way that you think about things. Also, if you want to think about it, feel free to take a moment and just kind of think.
If I can have sort of a brutally honest answer on this one. I think a big thing, and this is, I want to say this specifically for library science students, is that the pandemic made me think a lot more about labor in librarianship. We were shortchanged. We already had staff vacancies. We could no longer fill them because there was no money to fill them. People started leaving, getting jobs elsewhere, and we were still all coming in, working in person with masks on, processing books when we didn't know how bad things were. I think what was interesting about the whole experience was that I to be clear, I was happy in my previous job. Like, I just want to air that I was happy there, was very satisfied by work. But I think we also reached the point where it was like, okay, as with all this exacerbating everything, it was starting to help us recognize gaps in where we weren't satisfied in terms of things like labor and job satisfaction, like library wide. And that things like, hours or benefits or staff recognition, like there are just a bunch of ways to cut it. But I think it was the kind of thing that, I worked at my alma mater, my undergrad alma mater. So I had been there when I left earlier this year. I had been at that university for, 13 and a half years. I've been there for a long time. And I think a lot of us, it was a good job. The folks, everyone there agrees it's like, it's good work, but it's the kind of thing where it made me think more about my relationship between like my personal life and my work. And like, okay, if this is going to be this substantial part of my life, what could be different? What, how do I set those boundaries more firmly? We had a webinar early on, they were telling us about like work-life boundaries. And they said at the end of the day, put a blanket over your computer monitor to create physical distance. And it was like, this is really depressing. Like, I'm not a fan of it. So it was just the kind of thing where I think everyone who has, a career of has been having to reevaluate those questions. But I think especially in terms of librarianship, it made me notice where it's like, what am I not happy about? How could it be different in terms of my own life and how it relates to the work I do? That's a really vague thing, but it basically just means, well, we unionized. First of all, it wasn't really nice, but I guess for folks going into the field of librarianship, it is something to think about, that like there may be situations where pay isn't super great, or benefits aren't super great, or staff are being worked to the bone and there's not as much recognition for management and leadership. Like those kind of things can happen, and it's possible to envision or find work that matches more with what your own values are. Like it's difficult, but it's allowed. Like it's a valid thing to do, is to look for that. And that's kind of where I've been last 2 years.
I could say that I don't know. In some ways, my day-to-day hasn't changed because I do a lot of work. I've been working from my home since 2014. Well, working from home hasn't really been any different. But everybody else that I'm working for, working from home, it was different. So I think it sort of conditioned me to kind of forget about time. I don't know if this really makes sense, because everybody was, in their house and they still had to work, but the clock really didn't matter anymore. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But for me, it was just like for me, not paying attention to the clock was a good thing, because whenever I look at a clock, I get stressed out, because it's always like, counting down to when I'm supposed to be done. And if I'm not done, I'll lose it. But once, that pandemic, was in its height and everybody was locked in their house, that sort of went out the window. So I just sort of was like, okay, well, if the clock doesn't matter to them now, and the music industry was at a halt. Luckily for me, I was one of the only people I knew out of my group of colleagues that do the same thing, I got busier. I think a lot of people wanted to put out like, just they had the time, so they wanted to put out more work. A lot of more independent artists wanted to put out more work. And also there was a couple of like AAA games that I did mixing for, that I didn't think would be, on the calendar, and they just pop up in my inbox. So I think I probably got out unscathed, because I do know that there were a couple people that were just like sitting on their hands the whole time. But in terms of work ethic, it really made me kind of, this sounds corny, but like sort of focus on how I like to work more, because nobody was watching the clock. So I discovered, what pace I like to work at, and how many hours I need to, work at, and when's a good time to get up for physical activity. And I think it also made my clients, or just maybe clients in general, a little bit more empathetic to people who run their own business, because they're now working like they run their own business, from wherever you are at. They're not commuting to an office, or they're not talking from an agency, or wherever they could be. So in that regard, it was a good thing. But my concept of time has not recovered. Like I couldn't tell, like I still can't tell you what day it is and what time it, like I'll look up and I'm like, oh, it's midnight. And then the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, who cares? But then it's like, oh, it's not lockdown anymore. So go to bed. Like, it was very interesting time. I'm happy that it's hopefully, recovering. I don't know really what to believe anymore, but I think the bad, well, I can't speak for somebody else who isn't used to working at home. Maybe, it's hard to not be distracted, because you have, your TV, or if you're a gamer, your whatever, your console somewhere or wherever. For me, I've been struggling with that since the beginning. So I have that on lock. That's easy for me. I just have to wait till I'm done to go play, and then sacrifice my sleep schedule. But yeah, I guess I know in a way it's almost benefited my work ethic, because it made me realize that it's not healthy to work like you're under the gun, because the world really, I mean, even though the world is ending, it's not, it's not, the deadline isn't end all be all. People, I think people kind of understood that, see, like, all right, we hit the brakes, but we're still here, most of us, and I think that kind of shed some light onto like how to work at a more healthy pace. And my work definitely got better for it. That's for sure. Like, I don't like work without thinking anymore. Like, I don't work just for the sake of getting the job done. I think in any kind of creative industry, that's dangerous, or any industry for that matter. Phil, I'm sorry, I called you Patrick because I saw Patrick Burton underneath thing. But Phil, like hearing you talk about library methods and archiving and stuff like that, like I'm gonna be honest, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. But honestly, I love listening to people who are passionate about the shit that they love to do. It's like one of the greatest, like I love that. I think it's the coolest shit. And like, when you're hearing you talk about like archiving, like and finding a magazine with Adam Sandler stickers, I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like, honestly, like I'm like, oh, I never would have thought, so I feel like the positive side of the lockdown was sort of reestablishing the fact that I get joy from what I do. And you got to savor it, you got to savor it. At least, like you were saying, like, oh, the world is going to benefit. In fact, you said something really, really important. My mentor was like everyone's engineer. I mean, Beyonce's engineer. He's a genius. And he describes what he does for the good of mankind. That's when I always thought he was, when I first started to say, I was like, it's a joke, it's like, yeah, it kind of makes you sound more important than you actually are. But it's true, man. Like everything, anybody, if as long as you're passionate about what you do, you're doing it for others, and it's people in the creative industry take that for granted because we make music for other people. But I would imagine that people in other industries also take it for granted. Like if you would have told me that like what the archiving practices that you were researching, Phil, were going to benefit others, like without that education that you just gave me, I wouldn't know how to put that equation together. I wouldn't know how to get from, yeah, okay, I understand what you do, how does it benefit others, but like just hearing you talk for like 5 minutes, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's so cool to me. I think that the one good thing about that, just sort of everybody's slowing down. Hopefully they realize what they're doing brings them joy, and the bonus is that it's helping other people, and that's how you do your best work. And keeping that, omitting that, not having that joy in the forefront of your mind as you're working, it's sort of, what's the point then, right? I relinquish my time.
No, you
That's
guys
a lot
are
of
all
pressure.
good.
Richie's really inspiring, and now I'm inspired, but I'm like, oh goodness, because my reality of lockdown was slightly different because as someone who is in graduate school, yes, I work at the school, but I actually was already working from home to an extent, because that is just the balance of school in general. There are things that have to go home with you. But what I found during lockdown was that I very much changed the way that I worked, and I also lost track of the clock. So you give me hope that one day I will find myself again, Richie,
Right.
and get balance back, because I liked working in the middle of the night, because part of that is it was quiet in the middle of the night. That's when people are not emailing you. And I found that I could be really productive and in a place where I share with others, like they would be sleeping. And that was really a time for me to thrive. But then I found when I came back out of that schedule, there is difficulty in adjusting back. But I think one thing that it really changed for me was thinking about like, when do I work? When don't I work? And because I think especially when you are passionate about a thing, and I think everyone here is really passionate about the thing that they do. They're really passionate about the research, the things they're producing, creativity. But when you're really passionate about it, sometimes it's hard to remember when you're reading things because it's your job, or am I reading this thing because I'm just like in the weeds of it and I am compelled and I'm loving it and I want to do it. And that gets really difficult sometimes of like drawing a line there. So I think sometimes being more honest with myself is what the pandemic like forced me into, of being like, right now, how am I spending my time? And what is the end goal of that? Is it for self-satisfaction? And then I think that that's a lot healthier than just like, oh, do I feel like I like need to be productive and just like be working because I don't know when I'm supposed to work and not to work anymore because no one's telling me when that happens. And so I think that especially if you're in a field that you're really passionate about, like thinking about that with yourself is important, because it changed my relationship with my students too. The way that I teach in general is different. The way that I use digital like interaction with them, some of it I have kept out of the pandemic to move into now that we're in person. I use a lot more multimedia methods. I use a lot more things that we were using digitally that I thought were really successful, like when I took classes online. So it changes the way I interact with them, but I think it also changed the way how I thought about time with them. Like I changed the way that we do due dates. I changed the way that I think about how I want to pressure their time or not pressure their time and what matters in that regard. I think it gives a lot more kindness across the board, kind of like Richie is describing, of people being a lot more understanding of how things can slow down and that's okay. And is that something that's bad, or is it sometimes something that's just kind of needed? And that definitely, I was already someone who didn't love really strict due dates and like punishing people when they couldn't complete a thing on time. And I think that this gave me a space to think about how I wanted it to look instead.
I think, you know, it's interesting. I think I agree with that sentiment of like, so like you do feel punished sometimes for not making a deadline, right? Like you do feel like it's not, you're not worried that you're not completing the job, which should be the concern. You're worried that, you know, you're going to be seen a certain way because you're not delivering at a certain time, which has nothing to do with your scope of talent, you know, or your ability to do it at all, or the quality of the work. Like, you know, is it okay? There's a I don't know, you know, there's like a buzzword like hustle culture, which I can't stand. I mean, like, in fact, whenever I do either a Twitch stream or if I give a seminar or if I'm, you know, hired to speak at the school or something, that's the first thing I talk about. That's just like such a toxic way to think of working, you know. And in music, especially, you know, for those who want to break into the music industry, they think you got to wake up, make a hit record, make a hit record, make a hit record, make a hit record, go to bed, wake up, make a hit record, you know, it's just not how it works. You know, it's not even how it works. Like, you're killing yourself. Like, you know, to even like to just like get up in the morning, give yourself this insane goal that takes a team. You know, for those who don't know how it works, they're it's obscured. Like the information about a lot of, you know, I would surmise many industries is obscured. But for the music industry, a lot of it is obscured, and people make these like guesstimates about how work is really done. And if you're not, you know, dead tired at the end of the day, then you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Like, that's not how it works. And like, I think that like like feeling like that point that you brought, like, you know, like you're punished for not making a due date, like really, it really diminishes the quality of work across the board, across all industries, in my opinion. Like, if you're worried about not delivering, if you're more worried about not delivering than not delivering something that is quality, something that reflects, you know, you and how you can, you know, whatever it is that you do, like you're cheating yourself. You're cheating yourself, because then you're a slave. You know, what is this all for? You know, so that somebody could be like, oh yeah, this guy gets it in on time. And well, what if it sucks? Does that count? You know, I recently saw this thing on the internet, because I'm always auditing YouTube for music tutorials, because it's just a cesspool of misinformation these days. And there was this one, it was like a live seminar, just sort of like this, that got put onto YouTube, and they ran a contest of a song. It was a song mixing or production contest where you had to submit, and they were critiquing the submissions, and somebody didn't get a good critique. Someone didn't do, you know, according to the judge, didn't do a great job, but they commented, and I thought this was the most interesting part. Hey, you know, just want to say good on you for making that deadline, because making that deadline is 90% of it. And I'm like, you just gave him a shitty critique, but you're making it okay because he made the deadline. I would miss that deadline. You know, like if I knew I was going to deliver something horrible, I'd rather be like, hey, sorry, I couldn't make it, because then at least they don't know I'm bad. You know, like I would rather you think that I'm late than bad. But it's the opposite. It's the opposite in industry. It's so weird. They want you to be early and bad. Like, I'd rather be late and good. Late and good, dude. That's new t-shirts. Hey, I want to make sure that I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you guys a link to my merch store, and it's gonna have hats and shirts and socks that say late and good.
You know what? I'll wear it on my first day of class when I tell my students this is what I want.
Really?
Late's fine. I want it good.
Be late and good.
I love that. I really resonate with everything that you guys say. And I like the hustle culture thing. I hate that so much too. And it's so embedded, I feel like, in academia as well. And that affects, libraries, that it can affect anybody. And I've definitely seen some changes made as a result of the pandemic, I will say, like just like with everybody else, that, we still have a long way to go, I feel like, because it's rough. And we're not getting out of this pandemic just yet. So we're at 8 o'clock, but I don't want to, I want to give everybody else who's attending the opportunity to put any last questions in the box. So you can also direct message me if you want. And then to sort of finish off, if you guys have any last pieces of like just general professional advice you'd like to offer, that's always what we finish with. And then because of the nature of this talk, you can share if you want, you don't have to. What is your favorite game? And if you don't have a favorite, general ones that you like.
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
Think
Think about it. Take some time to think about it.
Man.
For a general professional thing, though, I think one thing I've noticed from all of us talking is that, we are all interested in games. The three of us, we've been, finding ways to apply in our own life. And I think that is something that took me a while to get to, was the fact that I always had in my mind, and it's not about games specifically, just about the thing you're interested in. There was like a right way to be involved. That like if you're in games, you're a designer and you're a developer and you work for Activision or whatever. I remember when I applied for a panel at MAGFest, and it was about the history of the people who made The Sims. And I remember I framed I can go on for like 5 hours about this. Don't start me. But
I love The Sims.
So many thoughts on that one. But I remember I framed it as a panel about like game design lessons, because I wasn't sure if it would get accepted, because it was like, well, there's not really a space for talking about like academic history of things. Like I always try to like fit that in. And I realized like, no, like you can take the thing you're interested in and apply it to what you do professionally. You can be in research or audio, and you can make games a part of that. You don't have to like, when I took the job at the foundation, a lot of people were like, oh, you're leaving librarianship to go into the game industry. And it was like, no, I'm still a librarian. My area of interest in my field is just going to be video games now, but I'm still a librarian. Like there are ways you can apply what you're excited about, what you're interested in, without having to, pivot your career to whatever the like default version of that industry's career is. Again, not game specific, like games in general, there's a lot of things, because there's so much happening. There's so many, like Courtney was saying, there's a lot of attention coming to it now in a lot of growing areas, but it doesn't have to be games either. It can be whatever your field of interest is. There are ways to apply that and make something out of it without having to, like you can be interested in marine biology and not become a marine biologist. There's ways to make those things work together.
Well, what's your favorite game?
Oh, right. I'm going to like throw like a real weird one. I'm going to say Riven, the sequel to Myst, is the second Myst game. It is a masterpiece. I love Riven. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, boy.
There we go.
Yeah, boy. That is a good one. That is a good one.
I think I would echo like obviously a lot of that, but I think probably career advice as well is, so like accepting the invitation to this night, I felt the need to state like, yeah, I'm not library information science, but I really enjoy attending things like this. And MAGFest is part of the reason I enjoy going to as well, is like people are passionate about the same thing that you are passionate about in a lot of different spaces. And you really only benefit from talking to those people, because it changes, like, first off, it's exciting conversation. But secondly, it changes the way that you think about things and how you frame things. And that can really help you a lot in how you approach everything as part of that learning process. Like, yes, I can go read about these things, but I think it is a lot easier to digest and more interesting and engaging to listen to people who are in that area and share passion with you and talk about it, and then learn what they're doing and then see where it takes you in conversation or collaboration in different areas. So I always would encourage effort, yet again, any field, but specifically, yeah, I think MAGFest has been a huge part of that for what I've been doing and how I got to where I was, because I'm in communication, but in my department, it's only 3-4 people who look at video games in general. That's not a main focus in our department at all. And so, yeah, I have to go outside to find people who want to talk and research that with me. And it's good in a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes it's sad, but it's also really good. So across the board, I think that would be my professional advice, is like, yeah, go outside your field, explore, talk to people. And then a game, oh, gosh, I guess I'm going to say Final Fantasy IV, not because it's the best Final Fantasy, but because it's the most nostalgic for me and I really love it. But I'm currently playing Hades. So
That's a good one too. I'm gonna tie in my favorite game and also to whatever, I don't want to call it advice, but like my professional statement. So my favorite game, I almost hate saying it. My favorite game is Legend of Zelda, the original one. I mean, just because it's just so, it's so filled with, it's just magical to me. The music is, there are a few songs in this world that I can listen to over and over and over, and just every single time get goosebumps. And the Legend of Zelda's theme song, I mean, pretty much, even the overworld theme, the dungeon theme, it's so beautifully done. Even thinking about it, I'm telling you, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. I have tattoos all over the place. It's all Zelda themed, and but okay, so I got into gaming and became addicted to gaming really, really young. Like my aunt, so I have an aunt that, everyone has an aunt that always gets the cool gifts, So my aunt got me a Nintendo, and Zelda happened to be in the gift. And I was, man, I don't know, 6 years old, 7 years old. And I remember like absorbing what you were supposed to do in the game. That I remember, because games were linear, you had to go to level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your achievements would compound, and they would allow you to go to the next stage. Just like that's typical game engineering. But in Zelda, you could go to the area that's going to be the last area, but you're not going to get in, unless you go through all these different things, right? So I remember that feeling. I mean, as a kid, I remember how odd it was. Like, wait, I'm at the end, but I'm at the beginning, but I'm at the end. And I remember like, it was almost like I was at the nexus of the universe, like as a child, like because of your limited understanding. And then as I got older, I started seeing how my life is almost reflected upon that, where I was always very passionate about music. I wanted to make a career out of it, and I had no idea how. And I would somehow find myself with people who were successful in music, as early as a high school student, because I was always just gigging around, sneaking out of the house, playing in bands, like I just needed to be around people who did it. And I would get the same feeling, like seeing, for example, I don't know if you guys know, I mean, obviously, Blink-182, right? So when I was in high school, I was in a punk band, and we were showcased. We caught the label attention of the label that signed Blink-182. So I got to go see Blink-182 and go backstage and like see, and that was like just such a huge deal, because I was like, oh man, I'm here. And but I would get that same feeling, like this is where I want to be, but I'm not actually enjoying the fruits. You know what I mean? You're at the end, but you're still at the beginning. And I remember that feeling. And it was just like, I was like, oh shit, it's Death Mountain. I'm in fucking Death Mountain right now, and that really taught me a lot about being patient and about not, it's really good to have a dream and a goal, but that's, you're not going to get there without, the experience. And that people want stuff. It also teaches you to be patient. Like people want stuff like now, I want this now. I want my bank account filled with $1 million now. I want a Grammy. I want whatever. Yeah, that's great. But like, you're there, and you could surround yourself with people who have made it, and you could inject yourself into social circles of people who are quote unquote successful or whatever, but you're not there. You didn't get you didn't get the raft. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And I swear to God, I still make that analogy sometimes to myself, where it's like, if I want something, if I aspire to do something, if I want to go and get something, if I want to have a landmark in my career, I'll think of it, and I'm like, okay, well, now what do I do? Like, what are the steps do I have to take in order to get there? And I don't know if that was on purpose, if that dynamic was put in the game on purpose, or what, but it really made me appreciate, sort of hoarding experience, and that just makes you love what you do even more. And that's important. And like listening to you guys talk, I mean, it's clear. That's another great thing about MAGFest. Like, I think there's two types of people that go to MAGFest. There's a social element of it all, because it is cool being in a place like that where everybody shares the same, it's not really conventional. I mean, I guess it is now because it's 2022 and it's not counterculture anymore. But to us, I think of a certain, generation, it is counterculture, because we were sort of like, you can go to a party and be like, yo, dude, you see Dragon Ball Z episode, whatever, and and try and be cool that way. Now you could do it. People are wearing it's part of pop culture. Back then it really wasn't. So like, I think that the people in our generation that we share that same kind of fiery passion for whatever it is that we do, because it's just, and it's, I don't think it's a coincidence that we also are very passionate about video games. I was teaching one more story, and then I'll relinquish my time. I was teaching because I used to teach audio engineering, and I got a class and we were just full of weebs, and it just so happened like everybody was just like, I didn't ask for that class. Like, it was, classes are given to you randomly, and everybody was like a weeb, and Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy, the one with the boy band. I don't know which one that was. One with Prompto.
15.
15. That's 15. That was coming out, right? And we were all excited about it. And I would literally someone would be like, "Dude, did you see the trailer?" And I would stop class and put it on the projector, and we'd watch it. And somebody in my class goes, "Man, I wish this was real life." And I was like, "Dude, same. I understand you." You know what I mean? It was like a camaraderie that we all share. That's I don't think that has to do with the game, man. I think that has to do with the type of person you are, where reality's cool, but there's also that that dream world that's just man, and it's infectious, So anyway, I don't know if you can get any professional advice out of that rant that I just gave, but there you go.
That was perfect, because the whole point of this event really was to go more outside of the box and bring you guys together, not just to talk about professional experiences, although we have to say that when we're planning this event, because that's the category we chose in Dragon, but to talk about something that we all are really passionate about. And this has been awesome, guys. I really, really appreciate you guys coming to talk about different areas, but also the ways that they intersect, and just really vibing about games and stuff like that we like. So seriously, guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put DULASA's email in the chat really quick. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out, or wants to know about the link, I'll probably be able to render this video tomorrow and post it to our YouTube for anybody. So yeah. I don't think anyone put questions in the chat, but yeah, we got a lot of Zelda and Blink-182 fans here. Can confirm.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And confirm Lydia has a Zelda tattoo.
Nice.
All right, well, I'm gonna let you guys go. If nobody has any more questions, thank you all again for being here. Keep an eye out on social media for upcoming events. This is still waiting to be approved by GSA, but next month we're doing an archival talk, and also hopefully, fingers crossed, an in-person tour at Eastern State Penitentiary. So more info as that comes up. So yeah. Thanks, everybody.
It was nice meeting, vibing on video games.
Nice meeting everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.